Central, heading now towards the Col de Pays de Pérol, the highest road in this region, as the peloton are just coming up to the summit of the Néron. Veronk and Merckx have gone well over the top there. Veronk carrying a clean car today. He hasn't been beaten up any of the mountains. He's looking for the polka dot jersey of race leader. And in the peloton, still happily ensconced, the blue jersey of Lance Armstrong. The gap 10 minutes and 33 seconds. All manageable overall, by the way. Veronk and Axel Merckx are both 12 minutes behind the race leader. So just now, they're approximately 2 minutes of becoming first and second in the overall rankings. And that's probably the reason why Thomas Voigt's team are keeping a nice steady tempo on the front, trying to control the race, because they know that the most difficult parts of today's stage are still ahead of them. There's the peloton keeping up a nice fast tempo on a good steady climb here up on the dizzy heights of the Col de Néron. Good tempo work there, and over the top has gone Veronk and Merckx, as these boys are continuing just to stay regular. I think, you know, Paul, the first half hour of the race, the riders went absolutely crazy, attacking all over the place, and in the end it looked as though US Postal had just got control of the race and slowed it right down.
Well, they were very worried about in the first half an hour of the race, a group of 17 riders actually got clear. Now 17 riders on a day like this is too dangerous a group to allow to go clear, and I think Armstrong and his team were very worried about a similar scenario to what happened on the stage to Pontarlier a couple of years ago, where a breakaway actually got a 30-minute advantage. Once the US Postal Service control the front end of the main field, they pull that group of 15 or 16 back. This is something that's happened at the back of the main field.
He's just crashed. One
of the CSC riders has been involved in a little bit of a fracas. It looked like Nicky Sorensen who was involved there. And it must have happened at the front end of the main field, because in fact one of the Brioche riders went down as well. That's Didier Rousse, and in fact he went into the side of the road there.
Well, he did crash. He touched the wheel there. I think it was Carlos Sastre, but it wasn't serious. He's just putting his bike back together again, and he should be on his way. A little bit of a chase in store, but these boys aren't under pressure yet. Good tempo riding by Brioche La Bourangère, and in fact they'll be very pleased with the way this race is going now. They can't allow the two leaders to take much more on the day, because otherwise they'll be passing the maillot jaune across to Richard Veronk, who started the day 12 minutes 35 seconds behind Thomas Voigt. At the moment it's 10 minutes and 37 seconds, so he's nearly recouped all the time he's lost over the first 9 days of the race.
There's not very much downhill before they actually kick up again once more to the skies. This downhill section in between the Col de Néron and the big climb of the day, the Col de Pays de Pérol, they go downhill for around about 6 kilometers, which is 4 miles. It shouldn't take them very much more than 6 minutes downhill, and as you can see, the average speed at a time like this as they go downhill is pushing up to around about 60 kilometers an hour, and that's 40 miles an hour, I would say, an average speed.
That's right. They're not taking too many risks here. Roads are brilliantly dry today, thank heavens, and no danger, because the descent, funnily enough, of the Col de Pays de Pérol is extremely difficult, very sinuous. There was 1 or 2 riders that fell off the side of the mountain. They had a tourist trial of some 8,000 cyclists over this very route last Sunday on closed roads, and one rider went off and he had to carry his bike back up the road. One of the British riders, former world champion Tony Doyle, he's actually still in hospital with broken ribs and a collarbone.
Interesting to note there, although we're now looking at the two leaders, Merckx on the right-hand side and Richard Veronk on the left-hand side, they are just reaching the point where they will start this very big first category climb, the Col de la Pays de Pérol, or as it's nicknamed here in the area, the Puy-Marie. But at the front end of the peloton, I actually noted one of my favorite sprinters, and a lot of the sprinters have been dropped so far. Eric Zabel was riding in the top 10 to 15 places.
He's such an amazing all-rounder. Watch out for Stuart O'Grady too, because he's a bit more than a sprinter, as Robbie McEwen, the other Australian, well knows. And O'Grady wants the yellow jersey, and he's only got a couple of days to do that before we get into the Pyrenees, and then he really doesn't have much of a chance. There they are, sitting up there. Must have been a bit of a climb up there today to get a great view of the Tour de France, passing beneath them here as they make their way to the Pays de Pérol. The Puy-Marie is the actual landmark here, but there's no road actually over the top of the Puy. The actual road is called the Pays de Pérol. Nonetheless, it takes them up to over 6,000 feet when they get to the top of that climb, and they'll still have 2 more climbs to come after they've gone down that one.
Well, everyone's starting to get just a little bit more nervous now. I think everyone wants to start this descent in the first few places, and you can see one or two dark blue jerseys moving to the front end of the fold, and that is the jerseys of the US Postal Service and Lance Armstrong. Nobody have really been left behind on this climb. It's not that difficult to climb at 8.5 kilometers, 3.3% in gradient. And on the front end of the main field, it's the oldest man in the bike race, Yaroslav Ekimov. Probably the most experienced bike rider too, a fabulous man who over the past has been a holder of a number of world records on the track, and now he's riding himself right up into the record books as well in the Tour de France, because he's participating here in his 14th Tour de France.
And never given up once. Let's hope he continues all the way to Paris. There's Bettini now getting a bit excited. Big man in the green and white is Christophe Moreau. Can't quite work out why he's chasing these points, but he's been fourth over everyone so far. And Bettini's beat him in the sprint. Bettini taking a good look at him there. There's the summit of the Col de Néron. The distance in actual kilometres between Break and the bunch is just over 5. That's 3 miles between the two leaders at the minute. And they're speeding down now. Well, as we've just seen, they've actually started to climb the lower slopes of the Pas de Pérol, and it does kick up very, very steeply in places. Here comes the sprint, perhaps.
On the right-hand side there in the orange, white and blue jersey of Rabobank, you could see Levi Leipheimer moving up to the front. This is an important day for him, a big acceleration at the front for Paolo Bettini. And once again, Christophe Moreau going with him. And I really cannot understand, Phil, the idea of Christophe Moreau, because I've never seen him ride high in the King of the Mountains classification. It's an easy way to pick up points, but seriously, I don't see him being a challenger in that competition.
Well, and he's never tried to take on Bettini. He's just followed him and gone over in 4th place, as he has now done over 5 of the climbs today. As we watch that beautiful backdrop, looking so nice at the moment. The peloton now having to work out. There's the champion of Norway, Hushoff, not riding quite so well today. He's having a bad day, actually. But he's hanging on to the tail. Meanwhile, up front, these are the two boys out in the lead, and still continuing good tempo as they climb now the lower slopes of the Col de Pas de Pérol. Right, this time as we go to break, here's our Subway Tour trivia for you. When was the last time the overall Tour title was won by a rider who didn't win an individual stage? Was it A, 1996, B, 1990, or C, 1966? To our Subway question, who was the last rider to win the Tour de France without winning an individual stage? The answer was 1990, Greg LeMond, and in fact, he only took the race lead the day before it finished. But that's good enough for the win. He never won any of the daily stages. Let's go back to the action now as we're climbing the highest road in the Massif Central, and there is the peloton really speeding along just now. They're dropping away from the Col de Néron. The two leaders are on the Pas de Pérol climb. Beautiful countryside, a beautiful day. It's actually quite warm too. It's in the low 70s, or about 22 degrees, 23 degrees Celsius. And the riders now just trying to work out quite what they do, Paul, because the gap is still nudging up, albeit by a second or so, but it's the right way as far as the riders are concerned.
Yes, it's the first time the riders have had a certain amount of heat and humidity in the race as well, because we've pushed up to around about 64 degrees Fahrenheit for the first time. The sun is absolutely superb, and there's a fair amount of humidity in the air, and that actually changes after you've been riding in a lot of cold and damp conditions to all of a sudden get a nice sunny day. Sometimes the body doesn't react exactly the same way as you want it to. I don't think anybody in the main field is too concerned about catching these two riders. Yes, they may well be a threat to the overall lead of Vukla for the moment. I think they'll lose 3 or 4 minutes on the next few kilometers of this very big climb, but they're never really going to jump away and finish 20 minutes in front. It's not really a day when I expect the big challenges to come out, but it may well be a chance for somebody to maybe just try the waters. And that man who seems to be very nervous at the front of the group was Tyler Hamilton from Team Phonak.
Well, and just looking at these two riders, they're about 3 kilometers from the summit of the Pas de Pérol, and they are really attacking this climb at the moment. Armstrong's group at 10:49. I think we're going to see a lot of riders in that peloton, though, find themselves in difficulty here. The Pas de Pérol is the high point of the Massif Central, but then we go on to the Plomb de Cantal, which is the department we are racing through now, and that counts for double points, and that's what Veronk really wants, are the double points on the last climb of the day. He'll get 20 mountain points for that. He's pretty much almost assured. He needs just to confirm at the top of this climb, and then he will be the leader in the King of the Mountains, taking the jersey away from his teammate Paolo Bettini. who's doing a great job sweeping up at the back just now. These boys turn these roads into almost downhill stretches. I never cease to be amazed how fast they climb these roads, because this was the road that the riders on Sunday in that sort of tourist ride were all walking up here.
These riders are working very well together as well, and let's not forget in the recent past they've actually both been teammates on the same team. So when you get away in a breakaway like that with somebody you know fairly well, you know that the other rider is not going to hold back and they will fight it out at the end. In fact, this is coming to the steepest part of the climb, and Axel Merckx here is being put under a little bit of pressure. He's a bigger, heavier rider than Richard Virenque, who you can see in front there is starting to dance on the pedals a little bit. But I think Richard Virenque, although he might be putting Merckx under pressure, needs the assistance of Merckx if he wants to have any chance at all of surviving to the finish.
Well, this is why Merckx wasn't too worried about taking mountain points, because he knew the talent he was riding alongside with. And remember too that the final 1.5 kilometres of this climb is the steepest gradient of this year's Tour de France, a massive 12%. It might even be a bit sharper than that, actually. Depends where you go around the bends.
Well, it's in the last part of the course. It's the last 1.5 kilometres where it really kicks up, and these two guys haven't actually got there yet, and that is steeper than any of the corners on the climb up to the summit of the Alpe d'Huez, because those corners on the Alpe d'Huez kick up to 11.5%. Virenque now just getting into the zone. He's just concentrating. He's just ticking out the pedals. Merckx is losing a certain amount of his advantage. What he's going to have to do is just try and ride this climb at his own rhythm, not lose too much time on Virenque, and then really accelerate over the summit.
Yes, Virenque is the man. He knows it, and it's best just to... One thing you can't do in a mountain is accept other people's pace. You've got to ride the mountain at your pace. If it's not quick enough, then you must hope you can repair the damage on the way down. But you mustn't be drawn into trying to match somebody else's pace, because all that means is you'll just blow up and you'll go back so fast you won't believe it.
Well, from the summit of this climb, there's just inside of 65 kilometres to go to the finish, and Richard Virenque is a sensible professional bike rider. I think although he's dancing on these pedals at his own rhythm here, once he goes over the summit, I can envisage him actually waiting for Axel Merckx on the descent, because it's a long ride to try and do on your own, 70 kilometres.
Richard Virenque riding away from Axel Merckx at the moment on the Col de Peyrolle, and Virenque riding his 12th Tour de France here, and looks as though today he is laying the foundations for the King of the Mountains title yet again, and it will be for a record-breaking 7th time. Just look at that face.
Really just concentrating on dancing away there. It's his own rhythm that he's setting here on the slightly steeper climb as we get up to the summit of this col here, the Col de Peyrolle, not too far away from the Puy-Marie. And if he's got 20 to 30 seconds advantage over Merckx at the top, I think he will do the sensible thing and wait for Merckx to rejoin him on the descent, because the next two climbs of the day are not really all that difficult. This is the back of the peloton, and the sprinters are certainly not having a good time this afternoon. Thor Hushovd at the back there, number 57. Just in front of him, the leader of the green jersey race, Robbie McEwen. He's not too worried about this. Robbie's been in these situations before. They're joined by the heaviest man in the bike race there as well, number 131, Magnus Backstedt.
Riding the white there, Mikel Pradera. He's been knocked around a bit with a couple of rather nasty crashes these last couple of days, and he's also going back with them there. They'll form a group behind. They'll form themselves a strange relationship as they help each other to evade being eliminated. And they know what to do to stay in the race. They'll help each other race to the finish. Robbie chatting there with Magnus Backstedt, saying, well, no points for the green jersey today, but let's get to the finish sensibly and not lose too much time. They've only got just over 60 kilometres to go, and that for them, they know they won't be eliminated if they stick together. This man is just stamping on these pedals now. He's pulling away with every pedal rev from Eddie Merckx. How about trying Axel Merckx, Eddie's son, as they continue up the climb here. 10:40 the gap on Armstrong's bunch. The main field thinning a little bit. But you know, this rider, as he comes up towards the summit there, I'm sure will wait on the descent and let Axel get back up. He needs some more strength for what lies ahead today.
It's too far to the finish to try and ride on your own, and it would be a much more sensible decision for him to wait here for Axel Merckx, who is a slightly bigger, heavier rider, and Axel will have the advantage on the descent, of which is a very technical and difficult descent. Not too far away from the summit now, and this is a very steep climb, and we're already getting into the atmosphere of the mountains. This is an amazing thing about a climber. A climber really enjoys this terrain because he can get out, he can set his own tempo, nobody can stay on his wheel. And the crowd here, let's not forget, on the 14th of July, Bastille Day, are very happy encouraging a Frenchman to the top.
Well, I saw his face then, and that was a huge effort by Vironk. He doesn't always show us the effort he's making, but this is a serious push on now. Look at the faces of the people as they're almost shouting in his ear. Allez Vironk. He's a man who's won on all the famous mountain tops, at Les Ardennes, at Cauterets in the Pyrenees, at Courchevel, at Mont Ventoux in the Alps. He's also won in the valleys in Morzine twice. He's won 6 stages of the Tour de France. He's won 6 times the King of the Mountains. He's been thrown out for taking drugs. He's been in disgrace. And he's come back and he's still retained himself at the very top of the cycling tree.
This man's 34.5 years of age, and there are so many people out here to support him because we're not really all that far away from his home area. He comes from the Var, which is just inside of the area from Saint-Tropez. And you can see there that Axel Merckx is the chaser #1 out on the road. He's caught in between the leading rider, Richard Vironk, and the main field, but he's only around about 6 seconds in the rear, so he hasn't really lost anything yet.
And the field hardly dragging their heels. They're hanging on in there at 10:30. So they're closing in very slightly now on the 2 leaders, and we need to see an inroad into this lead at some stage now, because otherwise these boys are going to stay away to the finish. Now, Vironk is looking ahead. He's made his effort. It's now beginning to tell just for the moment. He needs a little bit of recuperation. He's pulled away a bit further now from Axel Merckx. And if we can get a shot here, you'll see the massive crowd goes right out. There it is. Right up into the distance is the banner at the top of the Col du Pas de Peyrolle, the highest road in the Massif Central, at 1,589 meters as he pushes on. There's the Puy-Marie, but there's no road over there. Otherwise, I reckon we'd be going over there too.
Well, the race organisation certainly would like to take it to the highest point, and this is the highest point of the Cantal region of France. Vironk is just dancing away. He's riding at his own pedal rate. He's riding at his own rhythm, just making sure that he gets the maximum points where he goes over the summit of this climb. He's into the barrier area now, so he's inside of the last 500 meters or so. His advantage is opened up quite a lot over the last kilometre and a half to 24 seconds ahead of Axel Merckx. But Axel Merckx could very easily pull it all back together.
Well, I'm hearing that Iban Mayo lower down the slopes has stopped by the roadside. I don't know whether we have a camera down there. If we have, I'm sure we'll switch to it. But he's got a flat tyre at the most crucial part of the climb. Boy, his luck's not in this year so far.
Well, the team gets bad luck. It really does seem to linger on so many times. In fact, Zubeldia had 2 punctures in the first part of today's stage, and he too had to chase back at a very difficult time. So I'm fairly sure that because of the fact that the main field is just riding a steady tempo here, Iban Mayo should get himself back into the main field. But these accelerations are coming out of the front end of the peloton, and it's not surprising to see Liberty Seguros, the team of Roberto Heras, just testing the waters here to see if anybody's going to chase them.
Maybe coincidence, but the other Spanish rider, Mayo, is the one in trouble, while Spain now launches an attack at the front end. But I've just heard too that one of Mayo's teammates has given up his wheel and he's left to stand on the road, and Mayo is making his way back into the peloton. So that was quite a critical moment there for Iban Mayo. Obviously we didn't have a camera behind the peloton at that point, otherwise we'd have seen the pictures. Looking then, over the top goes Vironk, and with the 15 points he gets there, he also gets the lead in the King of the Mountains. Here comes Axel Merckx, and they're not very far apart, so I suspect that I never know with Richard Vironk, in all honesty, but I would expect Richard Vironk to hang on a little bit.
Well, you can see the clock ticking away here on Axel Merckx, and it's going to be around about the 30 to 35 second mark, and it's a kind of distance that can be completely and utterly wiped away over the summit as Axel Merckx takes on board a drink here, and he will probably very quickly be up to maximum. In fact, it's just 40 seconds over the summit there, the official time check coming through.
And this is the situation at the back. There is Mayo coming back now. Another teammate who's waited for him. Ironically, the man who won the stage into Saint-Flour a few years ago, the only other time we've been there, David Echevarria. And at the front, it's Serrano who is pushing the pace.
Well, this may well be something interesting being set up here by Liberty Seguros, launching a man off the front end of the main field. I think it's really just to test and see if the reactions will come from anybody else.
Marcus Serrano launching then a little attack here for Liberty Seguros, trying to steal the points. Merckx is going over the top, 39 seconds behind Vironk. We'll take all of the action when we come back. Welcome back, and poor old Iban Mayo, he's had a flat tyre. Just as he gets back, something else has happened. Looks like yet another flat tyre, and he's just been pushed back into the field here. His teammates hanging on the back, including David Echeverria, looking over where he's gone. Just look at that acceleration as he tries to rejoin the race. And there is Jan Ullrich riding on the shoulder of Andreas Clouden, and right behind Ullrich is the man Ullrich fears most, Lance Armstrong. And I think we could say that the other way around as well. First time we've seen Ullrich today. I wonder how those legs are feeling. He says he doesn't know how well he's going until he gets there. These are the men who are trying to make this a reasonably quiet day. They've got two men up front, two men they won't see as long-term candidates for their yellow jersey. And Ullrich and Armstrong riding together. Not too far away is Thomas Volkler, who looks extremely good today. And I think we'll be looking at another yellow jersey tonight.
But these are the big men. These are the heads of state of the sport. No expression at all on the face of Jan Ullrich there, just sitting down in the saddle, taking over a monster gear. On his shoulder there, Lance Armstrong just having a look at how this man is going to respond when we go to the big mountains. And Paolo Bettini, the leader of the King of the Mountains classification. I'll tell you one thing, that position indicates to me that he's going off the back.
He's tried all day to keep himself in the points competition. He still is second in the King of the Mountains, but right now, I'm afraid the King is dead. Long live the King, who is now Richard Virenque as far as the mountains are concerned. As these riders' legs have just hit the wall. Alan Davis nearest camera, who is the young Australian in his first Tour de France, on the same team as Roberto Heras.
What a damage this climb is doing. This climb is very steep as we get up to the summits. You can now see there are not very many riders left at the front end of the main field, but the yellow jersey is still right in there. Thomas Volkler is riding an unbelievable race in defense of his lead in the overall classification. Let's not forget, he has a 9.5-minute advantage over Lance Armstrong, and he's doing a great job to stay in contact with these men.
He is a very much an above average climber, Thomas Volkler, and once he's pulled on the yellow jersey, I think you become even higher than that, because you will not let that jersey go without a fight. It just shows you, though, the quality of the big men, the men we've always talked about as likely winners of the Tour de France. The big difference in their talent when it comes to a climb like this. We've got Cloden doing a wonderful job now for Ullrich on his shoulder. Armstrong doing right. He's just marshalling Ullrich, keeping an eye on him. We would love to see Tyler Hamilton right now and Levi Leipheimer. It looks as though Tyler might be tucked off to the left there.
Yep, there's a couple of riders from Team Phonak. I'm looking over to the right-hand side. I can see a Rabobank rider. The helmet there must be that of Levi Leipheimer. Andreas Cloden on the front there, the man who's the German national champion, has been a fantastic rider over the last couple of years. But it's not surprisingly the Spanish riders who want to go out on the attack. Il Baleares, the Balearic Islands team here, launching a move off the front end of the main field. Armstrong moving up into the front end of the peloton with a very good teammate alongside him. That is Jose Acevedo, the Portuguese rider brought in at the last moment. And I think he's going to be an absolute superb asset to the team, because not only can he ride well in the mountains, but he's also pretty good on the flat stages too.
Well, looking down there, last thing I want to do is spoil the party, but I think that's Michael Rasmussen, the Rabobank rider, who's up there and is threatening to do a great ride in this year's Tour de France. But it's still quite a big leading group, this. And it's going to become a select group for sure. There's no doubt about that. Mikel Astoloa here just trying to hang on to the tail of it. There is chance, of course, for them to regroup. But look at that, Paul. The first real serious big climb of the Tour de France. We're looking at 15 men.
Really being reduced in numbers, and looking down there, the yellow jersey is still sitting nice and comfortably in that group. I think that's Levi Leipheimer to the bottom right-hand corner there. It is Rasmussen in the middle at the front in about third position. You can see the bands on his arms indicating he's a former world champion, and that was in the mountain bike. Armstrong, a little bit of a psychological ride here, I think, riding alongside his teammates. And on the far side, around about 6 feet away from him, is Jan Ullrich. And it's funny, Liz, look at them. Neither one is actually looking at the other one to see how they're performing.
Nice ride too, far left. Another name we came to know quite well in the Tour de France and Tour of Italy. Now it looks as though a little bit of a drop back here for Thomas Volkler. He's just looking over his shoulder. Not a good sign as he lifts it out the saddle again. He's only lost a little bit. He can get it back on the downhill. I was about to say that Fabian Weckmann, there he is, just tucking through. We came to know a lot about him when he won the King of the Mountains in the Giro d'Italia this year.
Moving up there as well, you can just spot the Spanish national champion Francisco Mancebo. He's pretty high up in the look at that vocal. What a courage this young man has got. I was reading an article by Jean-René Bernadotte, his team manager, who said this guy is not a very good climber. He can't climb consistently, but he can accelerate on the climbs. And look at this.
Well, he's an amazing guy. He's going to get his second breath. He's over the top. He's even grabbed some points at the top of that climb because he's come over there, well, looks to me, in 4th place. So that's the cheek. We thought. Remember when he got his yellow jersey, Paul, which was now a week ago, last Thursday? We thought he was dead, and he came back and he rode so well.
Yeah, he's a good bike rider, and he certainly had the courage there to accelerate. He probably just relaxed a little bit in the last 500 meters, knowing that he could accelerate over the top and stay in contact. Iban Mayo here is just off the back end of the group. He's been put under pressure here really because of the fact that he's had a couple of punctures and a couple of wheel changes on the slopes of this climb. The team are all up alongside him, and that's fairly good to see. And I think on the descent there shouldn't be any problem at all for him to catch back up to the leading group of contenders.
Well, I saw him up there alongside Eric Zabel. You wouldn't expect Zabel to be near a climber of Mayo's ability. So even though he has had trouble, I'm not sure he's going at all well right now. Here's the man who is, though, number 101. And Ulrich is in good form. We'll take a break. Rejoin us shortly.
Skiing, base jumping.
Come back as we're looking here at the head of the peloton now, as they make the descent, and this has just happened. In that group was Matthias Kessler. He overshot on a bend, and it was a very, very nasty crash. Watch the centre left of your picture. He simply didn't come round this corner, Kessler, and there he goes, and he just left the road, and it's after he hits the ground where his back just clouts that upright post there, and at best it's winded him, and let's hope that's all it's done. He's still on the roadside as we speak. The doctors have now arrived with him as the race continues down. This is a very select group now, and I think this is the way that Lance Armstrong was expecting the day to go, as he wanted just a select group to go to the finish. He's never been under any pressure, neither has the big leaders, Hamilton or Ulrich. They're all in this group, but they've got to watch this descent. Believe me, it's dangerous. There's the leader, well, experience the wonder and the excitement of the great outdoors too, as OLM brings you the greatest moments in outdoor and action sports. Outside Magazine's Ultimate Top 10, that's up next right here on OLN. Out you go. Looking at the face here now of Richard Virenque, who has not waited for this rider, Axel Merckx. He's about half a minute ahead of him, and he's pushing on. Well, a very heavy fall, that, Paul. Let's hope that Kessler is okay. Merckx here is holding his own now. He's not getting any further behind Virenque. He's not getting any closer either.
I tell you what, that was a very hard crash there by Matthias Kessler. I'm just looking at this group here, Phil. I can't see that many orange jerseys. Yes, there is an orange jersey on the front, but I was wondering whether or not Iban Mayo has actually yet managed to get himself into the front group with the yellow jersey.
No, I don't think he has. This group got away, and I still feel as though he did have trouble, Mayo. He wasn't up to it to get back very quickly, so I don't think his form is that great right now. He's had a great season. He might have gone off the boil. Well, we'll see now, because the men that matter have got themselves up here, and now they've got to be careful on the way down. Twists and turns all the way down to the basement before we climb the Col d'Entremont, which will take us into the last 30 miles or 48 kilometers of racing today. And Virenque is definitely going for this, and he wants all of the limelight, and he wants nobody with him. Currently just over 9 minutes ahead of the peloton, and poor old Axel Merckx is getting no closer.
No, he's just holding there. He's locked in now at 35 seconds, and that's a bit of a shame. If the descent had been just that little bit steeper and a little bit more dangerous, Axel could have taken a few risks in the corners, and I felt certain he could wipe away 35 seconds disadvantage. Here is Kessler at the side of the road. He's actually standing up. He seems to be recovered, and the way he went down there, I find it very hard to believe that this man was not seriously injured. I think the problem now is he has to wait for one of the team cars. That's Walter Godefroot at the side of the road talking to him. And it was an unbelievable crash of Matthias Kessler. When he came around that corner, all of a sudden everybody was looking back to see who was in the group, and he just catapulted off the road. But I think the damage was done when he hit one of the fence posts, and he's probably actually made a serious mess of his machine.
Well, I reckon he's winded pretty badly. As Virenque here won't know anything about that. He's continuing to climb now on the next climb of the day. Kessler, by the way, it's his second Tour de France. He rode very well last year to finish in 49th place. and hopefully he's going to get himself away here. He's going to continue, but his back must be at worst incredibly heavily bruised. But and of course he'll have clouted his lungs. He won't be able to breathe deeply at the moment. So let's hope that he can do it. There's the crash again for you. A horrible fall, but hopefully he is going to be okay. These boys are made of rubber. I'm totally convinced about this, and he's going to try and make it to the finish. Let's hope he does. This is the leader now, Richard Virenque, pushing on. The order over the top, by the way, is Virenque, Merckx, Menchov, Manthebo and Vukler took 5th place. This guy's aiming for first at the finish in Saint-Flour. We'll take a break. Come back soon. Come back as we're now looking at the main head of the field in today's stage of the Tour de France, and just leaving the pack has been Oscar Pereiro, a teammate of Tyler Hamilton's. Hamilton is safely in this group, by the way. We just caught a glimpse there of Levi Leipheimer, so the Americans aren't doing anything wrong at the moment and are not using up more energy than they have to today. This man is, though, as he pumps away. He's topped the Col d'Entremont. He has one climb to come. He's won them all so far. He is building himself up a convincing lead already in the King of the Mountains competition. There is the summit of the climb. That'll be another 4 points in the bag. It's not so much in it for this one, but it's good enough to keep adding up to make him the leader today of the King of the Mountains. Richard Virenque pushing on too. As soon as the road went up, the gap to Axel Merckx, who is chasing, has gone back to almost 1 minute. The main field at 9:18, 9:15 currently, and that's where Lance Armstrong is, because the peloton itself is all over the place. Now, is this another crash here? I'm afraid to say somebody else is down in the ditch there at the moment, and I don't know who it is. I'm just trying to catch a look at the bike there to see what model it is, because that would give us a clue at least to the team. But this particular crash looks rather bad. Now, we've seen the crash to Kessler, who has gone down so far. He's up and riding, and we hope that he will finish the stage. Can't even see the rider in the ditch there, but quite clearly he is. As we look now back to the summit of the climb, Axel Merckx is coming over the top to take 2nd place. He'll go up to 2nd place overall in the King of the Mountains competition. Wasn't his prime objective of the day. I think he was going out with Virenque in hope he could win the stage. But nonetheless, he's conquering the mountains of the Massif Central today. Little bit, doesn't know what to do now. He's looking here a little bit perplexed, because he's not going to catch up with Richard Virenque. I think we all agree with that right now. But he's still 8 minutes ahead of the field. Now, this is quite a serious crash here, and I still can't give you a clue as to who it is. The race radio is not helping us with any information either, as the race continues to come down. And it looks as though Pereira has decided to go back into the pack here. He's made his effort. Vukler, who went over the top of the big climb in 5th place when he looked to be in trouble, he came back and crossed it in 5th. There he is in yellow. He's surviving well today, and he'll be in yellow again tonight. They're off the dangerous descent now of the Pas de Pérol as they head on to the lower slopes of the Entremont. And in fact, I've now seen the number on the bike. It looks as though it is in fact Pierrick Fedrigo of Crédit Agricole who is down there. If that is 54, I thought it was on the bicycle. Can't quite see. He's carried it away now. So it is a Crédit Agricole rider who is down there in the ditch. Well, how sad is that? And it looks... That's the team manager of Crédit Agricole, Roger Leger, who is running back to his car and leaving the ride in the safe hands of what is a brilliant medical team here on the Tour de France. They've dealt with very serious accidents over the year, and they really know what to do. Helicopters are on hand. They can be brought in, and they can land on the highway here if it's that serious. But let's hope it isn't. It looks as though he's sitting up, and well, I think it was Fedrigo, judging by the number, but I wasn't certain. We'll wait and see. Oh, this is a good sign. At least they're feeling they can bring him onto the road. And it's possibly Sébastien Hinault looking at his face, which is now gone. Anyway, it is, they're saying it's Sébastien Hinault at the moment who's gone down. Well, that's very sad indeed, because he rode so well in Brittany. There's no relation, by the way, to his namesake, Bernard Hinault. But it looks as though he's not going to continue now. That is a great shame. So, while Sébastien Hinault continues to head on now towards hospital, I regret to say we've now lost 3 riders out of today's stage of the Tour de France. And meanwhile, avoiding all of the problems, Richard Virenque, as he heads towards the finish with 44 kilometers to go, and he could yet do it. We'll take a break.
Ladies and gentlemen.
And welcome back as we look at the main front end of the peloton today, which is getting a little bit bigger now as they've come over the top of the big climb of the day, and the Maillot Jaune is settling back in control at the front with his French teammates here. So Thomas Voigtler looking set now to keep yellow, still on a runaway. Likely for the stage win now is Richard Virenque in this big field. Tyler Hamilton, Levi Leipheimer and Lance Armstrong and Jan Ullrich at the moment. They are the riders in the front. Well, as we can see down there, the leader of the race. Let's have a look at who is in the yellow jersey in our Nike yellow jersey moment. It didn't start too well for him, did it, for the French champion? He finished only 141st. Thomas Voigtler in the prologue, but then last Thursday he went out on the breakaway and he finished 4th on the stage, and the peloton were in double figures, so far behind him that they were. He took the overall lead, taking off the top place none other than Lance Armstrong, and he's kept that yellow jersey ever since. Looked a little bit shaky partway through today's stage, but he'd come back well, and now I think he's going to spend another day in yellow tomorrow. He really is developing in the true tradition of the leaders of the Tour de France. Thomas Voigtler has had a wonderful Tour de France, whatever happens in the road that lies ahead, because he's the leader of the Tour de France today on the first mountain stage of this year's event. Let's just have a look at, we can summarise his fortunes here. Started out 141st, gradually got better until the magic day came last Thursday when he got the race lead, and he has kept it ever since. That is your Nike yellow jersey moment. And as we look at Richard Virenque now, the organisation confirming on our radio that Sebastian Eno has in fact been taken to hospital. Well, it looks as though they're getting things back together, and Christophe Moreau again itching to move up to the front and snatch points up the climb. Very surprising.
Michael Rogers is coming by him, and Michael Rogers trying to get himself the points there, but it's going to go to Christophe Moreau. Rogers in second position. There you can see the red and white jerseys on the front of Brioche La Boulangère, and they're not too worried about fighting out for the smaller positions. And I'm a bit surprised to see this man looking to try and get himself the points out on the road.
So there's Christophe Moreau, and now of course Bettini, who is finishing behind earlier. He's now been dropped by the group and is some way behind on this mountain. So the riders now over the top of the penultimate climb of the day, the Col d'Entremont. Richard Virenque has gone over the top 8 3/4 of a minute ahead of Christophe Moreau in our picture there. This is the elite chase group, and really they are just watching one another now. I think Virenque has done enough to win this stage.
I don't think Moreau is going to. I don't think they're going to catch Richard Virenque actually, because of the fact that it's a very strange stage. It's not exactly a flat stage on the run in towards the finish, and Virenque didn't show any signs of weakening at all there. So I think he should survive. It just depends on whether any of the other riders in this group feel that they have got a chance of winning at the end of the day. But a very brave move, Phil, to go out on an attack like this.
Well, there's Richard Virenque now, riding so superbly, and don't forget he's won himself 6 stages in the Tour de France over the years, his last one coming in Morzine, which gave him a great feeling because he took the Maillot Jaune for a short time, one day in fact. He wasn't out for that though, of course. He was out for victory in the King of the Mountains, which he eventually got, and that's why he's in the lead again today. And currently his lead now is 8 minutes and 33 on the main field, or the head of the main field, and well in the lead now by over a minute and a quarter on Axel Merckx. Merckx might even stay away himself, but this guy Virenque is on a mission on Bastille Day. The Frenchman just taking the Tour de France and riding them all off his back wheel. Simply superb. It's his 12th Tour de France, and he's still going strong.
Pretty amazing, really, when you think about his career. He's coming up to 35 years of age, which he will have at the end of this season. He turned professional back in 1991, and in fact in his first attempt at the Tour de France in 1992, riding for the small French team RMO, he actually got himself the yellow jersey, and that was on the stage down in Tapau. And since then he's had a love affair with the Tour de France, and he's always shone well. He's made this the most important rendezvous of the year for him, He's held the yellow jersey. He's won the King of the Mountains on 6 occasions. Now you can see it's really starting to hurt here, but he is really feeding on the support of the crowd. He's actually currently the leader of the King of the Mountains classification with a 53-point tally from today, and he's now moved ahead of Axel Merckx and his own teammate Paolo Bettini.
Yes, Merckx has done enough now to get up into second place today behind Veronk. Looking here at Axel himself, turning in another exceptional performance. Dad will be pleased. He'll be watching him on Belgian television, I'm sure. There's the man of the moment. We'll take a break. Come back soon to OLN. Welcome back. The peloton, our Trek aerial view. And I must say that is a stunning view today from Trek. And you look down there and you can see the peloton has swollen a little bit after the descent of the hills. There's still one more to come. But that looks to me to be a peloton now of about 50 or 60 riders. And all of the favourites, as far as we know, and we think we're right, are in this group, with the exception, of course, of Richard Veronk, who might be going up to second tonight. 8 minutes 32. He's hardly lost his lead, and he's trying to hold them off. They got a little, and it's gone up to 8 minutes 35 as we speak. Our blackboard man there, or the greenboard man in this case, showing it there to Richard Veronk, again on one of his favourite missions in the mountains by himself. Rid himself of Axel Merckx on the steep climb of the Pas de Pérols, and has gone over the Entremont alone. He's still got the Col de Prat, which will take him into the last 32 kilometres, and he's 5 kilometres now from the top of the final climb of the day, with double points for the King of the Mountains. Merckx now almost 2 minutes behind, but still has a chance of surviving to the finish in second.
Pretty tough for Axel. I thought he might just have got himself back up to Richard Veronk, but once Veronk gets into these kind of zones that he gets into, he just wants to ride on his own. He wants to ride at his own tempo, and it's amazing sometimes when you look at the rider, because he really is a slightly built rider, but he still has the ability to ride with incredible courage.
Well, O'Grady currently second, but we don't know where O'Grady is on the race right now. If he's in this group, he'll hang on to second. If he's not, I think we're going to see a second place occupied by Richard Veronk. Armstrong could find himself in third or fourth place overall tonight. He will see that as a great bonus, but he won't be too worried. The most important thing to Lance Armstrong right now is that the men he fears most are riding alongside him, and that's important.
8 minutes to go, 8 kilometers to go to the summit of this final climb of the day, the Col du Pas de Bouc for Richard Veronk, and everybody is very excited about the fact that France is leading on Bastille Day. This climb is 8.2 kilometers in length. It's a very steep climb as well. In fact, towards the end, it kicks up again, like most of these climbs do here in the Cantal region, to around about 7.5%.
Well, he hits these hills with relish, doesn't he? As soon as he sees them, he's out of the saddle. Massive, massive crowds throughout the Massif Central today. Remember, the French are celebrating a national holiday. It is Bastille Day here, and they have flooded here into central France to see their favourite event, the Tour de France. And what better than a Frenchman leading the charge over the mountains? No yellow jersey, but there'll certainly be a King of the Mountains jersey for him today. And there's no way he can lose the stage either. He's going to win.
He shouldn't get caught at all. The only thing is he's got to make sure he keeps himself topped up with fluids, keeps himself topped up with food as well. I just noticed a few moments ago his team manager coming up alongside, Wilfred Peters, no stranger either to the Tour de France. Peters was the long-time lieutenant of Johan Museeuw, and he's making sure that this man keeps himself topped up with very high energy drinks.
There's the lonely Axel Merckx now running at just on 2 minutes behind the man up front, but he too could survive to the end today, and let's hope he can. And don't forget, for exclusive race highlights and behind the scenes action, AOL for broadband members, go to AOL keyword Tour de France or AOL.com. Look at the crowds here now, this corridor of noise as the rider now, Richard Veronk, presses on towards the summit, about 7 kilometers to the top. Well, it's been a great average speed today. Despite all of this, he's averaged nearly 38 kilometers an hour, which is an incredible speed over the terrain we've been today.
Absolutely remarkable, really, when you think about how much climbing these riders have had to do on a day like today. They will slow down to speeds of around about 15 miles an hour on the slopes of some of the climbs, but they're touching on the descent around about 40 miles an hour.
Our camera just stopping the riders. When the pictures are about to be lost, by the way, when pictures are live, we have little balances on the cameras that gives you a still shot just for a second or two. There is the Maillot Jaune, a very select group of riders today heading for the finish in the Tour de France. Armstrong is there, so too Hamilton and Leipheimer, and so too Jan Ullrich. We'll take a break. Rejoin us live on OLN. Welcome back, and through the corridor of noise, the huge crowd here on the last climb of the day comes two riders, and they're separated by about 2.5 minutes. Axel Merckx in second place, Richard Virenque at the front. Virenque is about to win the final climb of the day. He's taken all 9 today. There is the elite of the Tour de France with all of the projected favourites safely in there and pedalling out their day. And the gap has now gone out to more than 3 minutes here to Axel Merckx. He can't really match Virenque on the climbs. He loses big time once the roads tilt up. But the good news is, once over the top, just 32 kilometres to go.
Got to take my hat off to this team, though, on the front here. Brioche, Le Boulanger. There's the devil. He seems to have made a bit of a comeback to the Tour de France recently.
Yes, indeed. The trident over the head of Axel Merckx. I'm not sure that that'll be good or bad for him. We'll find out. Merckx now just not panicking. He knows he's just got to hang on in there now. The helicopter hovering in the distance there. I don't think he's over Axel Merckx. He's just waiting for him to come up the hill. Just look at the face of this man. Great tempo. Jean-Marie Leblanc, the race director, who himself in the late 60s rode the Tour de France on 2 occasions for the old sponsors Bic, and then became a journalist, and from that became the director of the Tour de France. He's seen it all before, but you can never fail to admire the way this rider climbs hills. And this was a horrible course today, and the longest stage at 148 miles or 237 kilometers. Looking there now at Richard Virenque. Don't forget the blue jersey on our graphic at 8:09 is Lance Armstrong, safely ensconced in what is becoming a very select front group of the Tour de France today. Well, one thing will be clear, we won't know the winner of the Tour de France by the end of the day, but we will know who all the challengers are, because if they're not in that group of some 40 or 50 riders, then they haven't got a chance today. And the perspiration running off the face here of Axel. There is the group now I was telling you about, and again, as we're running down towards the end of the day, the yellow jersey of Thomas Voigtler, the man from Martinique, is riding absolutely superbly again. He's taking control of this race. Well, as we look here at the leaders, let's go back to the start. Craig Hummer managed to catch a few words with Lance Armstrong.
A lot of people say unofficially the Tour starts today, and even you yourself have said you expect a few shakeups.
I do. I think a lot depends on the tactics of Brioche. If we can let a group, or if they let a group go early, then they can perhaps control the race. If it stays together over the big climbs there, then I think they'll have a hard time controlling the attacks, and we'll either have to control the race or have to go in the attacks ourselves. But I don't know. I mean, I still think Friday and Saturday are the big days, and today's long and dangerous, but I'm still waiting.
Starting to see a lot of red, white, and blue out on the course. A lot of fans. Are you guys able to soak up that pro postal love?
Absolutely, and I think all the American airlines or the international airlines need to thank us, because it's amazing how many Americans are on the side of the road, and I don't know if it's the tour groups or just individuals coming over, but man, they found their way out, and with flags and banners, and of course you can hear an American yelling as opposed to somebody else. So it's great. It's cool to see.
Indeed it is, and there are plenty of American voices down there today cheering for Lance Armstrong, Levi Leipheimer, Bobby Julich and Tyler Hamilton. Just looking here as we're seeing the rider slipping away off the back is Stuart O'Grady, but at least he was in the group call. If he can hang on now, he will still be in second place tonight.
Well, Stuart O'Grady is a very talented bike rider. Not only can he sprint very well on the flat stages, he has the ability to stay in contact over these sort of average mountain stages. You see the acceleration here. He's actually jumping on the pedals there to try and stay in contact with the group, because if he can stay in this group, he'll be looking to get himself a few more points at the end of the day in the green jersey points race.
And could well take it back off Robbie McEwen if he need a lot of points. We have smaller points today in the green jersey competition, so he'd probably just move up and consolidate the second place in that competition. Everybody together in this group that matter as far as we know, apart from poor old Matthias Kessler, who crashed heavily, and we haven't seen much of him since. This looks like Botero. No, it's Santos Gonzalez, is it? Who's going off the back slowly but surely.
Santiago Botero.
It is Botero, yeah.
80th overall, 14.5 minutes behind. But, you know, back in 2002, he was the world time trial champion. But this is the man doing the ride of the day, Richard Virenque, 34.5 years of age, born in Casablanca, Morocco, and then coming across to live for the majority of his life in the southern part of France. He's not too far away from the summit of this climb, a second category climb. In fact, he's just got 1 kilometre to go to the top of the Col de Pla de Bouc. 205 kilometres covered at the top, 32 kilometres to go to the finish, and the majority of them are slightly downhill.
Unbelievably tough call, but not Heartbreak Hill, though, which is a couple of kilometres bringing them up to the finishing line here, where we're sat in Saint-Flour, this beautiful walled city built right on top of a mountain, and they've got to climb up to the line. Merckx has been out there an awful long time. It is such a long way to go. He's now slipped back to just over 4 minutes on there. Once the road went up, you see, he loses massive time to Virenque, but he's still 4 minutes ahead of the field, although it's beginning to look less likely he'll finish second today. There's no doubt Virenque is going to win the day.
Not very many riders in this group either. I would say this is a group of between 35 and 45 riders. There is Armstrong just sitting behind his teammate Floyd Landis. And the yellow jersey, I think, under a bit of pressure, but still doing a good job of defending his overall lead. He will be put over pressure over the next couple of days when we get down into the Pyrenees, because there are 2 mountain-top finishes in the Pyrenees. The first one to the summit of the Col de la Mongie, which is halfway up the Col de Tourmalet. And then after that, the day after, he's got a very long, hard ride through the Pyrenees to finish at the summit of the Plateau de Bay.
And it's not the hardest day tomorrow, but it's not the easiest either, because again we have 5 categorized climbs, including a third and a second category. We start high up at Saint-Flour, we run down a little bit to lower levels before we finish in Figeac. But it won't be an easy day after the longest stage of the race today, and these crowds, of course, are going to stay around in this area and enjoy the tour. Massive pictures these of the riders, and Richard Virenque always played to front stage, and today no exception for him as he climbs up towards the summit of the Col de Pla de Bouc, which will be his last conquering mountain of the day. And boy, is he going to have a big lead in the King of the Mountains already.
Huge lead, and he's done this every year in the past when he's won this King of the Mountains classification, is go out on a big raid and get himself maximum advantage. Then after that, it's just a question of defending, and he's very good at defending on the slopes of these mountain passes, because he's got a very good acceleration at the top of the climbs. He's suffering a bit there, but that's not surprising when you bear in mind that he escaped after 35 kilometers, built up a maximum advantage at one stage of 10.5 minutes, and actually, if you look at the time back to the main field, 7 minutes and 45 seconds, he's not really losing very much at all.
No, he isn't, and he's only got just over 20 miles or 32 kilometers to the finish. He knows as the crowds get even bigger that he's running up towards the summit of the top of the last climb of the day. He's still riding as if the roads are flat here. Most cyclists who are going out for a ride, who call themselves cyclists, would climb these hills at around about 10 or 11 miles an hour, about 20 kilometers an hour. This man is shooting up at something like 18 to 19 kilometers an hour. As he comes up towards the summit, he conquers the final mountain of the day. He has won all 9 climbs. Now he'll concentrate on winning the stage. So Virenque, for him now, the road will tip downwards, just a little climb up to the finish of a couple of kilometers. It won't worry him. It'll certainly worry another lot of riders, though, when they get there. There's the devil, I hope, blessing Axel Merckx and getting him away to finish second. We'll take a break and come back soon. And we're back with the main field of the Tour de France. A very select peloton it is. There's the Maillot Jaune slipping back a little bit here as he comes up towards the top of the Col de Pla de Bouc. Vaucler will know once over the top of this, he'll keep his yellow jersey for at least one more day. This is the group which is containing Lance Armstrong, Tyler Hamilton, Bobby Julich, as far as we know. We haven't actually seen Bobby Julich. Stuart O'Grady just about hanging on to the tail. as we now come up towards the summit of the last climb of the day. And this is going to be a very, very good ride by all of the leaders. Nobody is cracked at all on this climb. As they now head up towards the summit, there's the gaps for you to see. Brioche doing all of the work. Don't forget to enter Trek's Ride with Lance giveaway, and do this by going to trekbikes.com to find your participating dealer. Well, he's been under pressure today, not by the heads of state of this race, but by his own legs. But Voigtler is still in that lead group. 6 minutes 10 now, and just over a minute ahead Axel Merckx. Paul, he's going to get swept up as soon as he goes over the top of the climb.
Psychologically, this is not a very good thing for Thomas Voigtler to do. I think he's actually going through a real serious bad patch. He's at the back there. He's being looked after by one of his teammates. Nice to see. That was Landeluz on the right-hand side there, the most aggressive rider of yesterday's stage. He finished 10th on the stage, just passing a drink across to the yellow jersey.
Nice gesture. He was the rider that was nipped on the line by 9 others in the peloton yesterday, but in the end he finished in 10th place, caught meters from the finish. Well, it was nice of him to offer a drink to the race leader, all friends in love and war, as they now come up towards the top of the mountain. I think he'll survive today, but it's looking a bit shaky for how long he'll stay in yellow.
Well, theoretically, if he survived today, which was a very difficult stage, he should survive tomorrow. But I don't think it bodes well for the finish at the summit of La Mongie. That's going to be a very difficult day for that young man. But he's done a great job, and the team have done a great job for him here this afternoon, because they have been absolutely perfect.
Well, it's worked out pretty much, I would say, as Lance Armstrong expected it to do. A small group, albeit a very small group of 2, got away, took the pressure. The Brioche team took control of the chase and kept an eye on their leader in yellow. And it's come through what has been a projected very, very difficult day indeed. It's not going to be long now before we see where we are. That's Sylvain Chavanel, who's just up front there. And he is also a rider who is now expected to become probably the team leader if and when Voigtler loses that yellow jersey. In fact, Voigtler just took one big look at Chavanel and went straight past him.
That was guts. He's riding on sheer guts right now, just to stay in contact with this group. This group, in fact, you can see they're just sitting there. They're riding along nice and comfortably, but it's put a lot of difficulty onto the shoulders of Thomas Voigtler. There's been a lot of criticism about the selection of Benjamin Noval, but there he is, just at the back of the group. He has stayed in contact with this group. This man has had 3 accidents so far in the Tour de France. He was in tears when he couldn't stay with the group in the team time trial, but I think he will be an asset in the last week of the Tour. This is further up. Axel Merckx still surviving, but he's only around about a minute in front of the yellow jersey group.
Looking at that group now, it looks as though Lance is relying pretty heavily on the other American, Floyd Landis, to keep him out of trouble. That was Landis up alongside him, and I think that's a good indicator that George Hincapie has not made this split, and he will slip away, but he'll live to fight another day in the aid of Armstrong. There's a final bit of I think it's a drink. Yes, it's a fresh drink for Axel Merckx as he goes second over the summit here, but he's a massive 6.5 minutes now behind Veronk, as Veronk speeds on towards the finish. This is further back here, attacked by Dufault.
Well, Dufault just nipping out of the front there to make sure that he gets a few extra points in the King of the Mountains classification, so that other riders like Christophe Moreau, who've been nipping away to get points over the last few mountaintop finishes, don't get them at this point. It's a very good tactical move by Quick-Step d'Avitamont.
20 seconds. He's been timed over the top. Laurent Dufault for 3rd place. So Axel now will freewheel down and will take it easy and will get swept up. Let's hope he can hang on to the big peloton now as they run towards the finish in Saint-Flour. Laurent Dufault, time for a high tea, I would say, on today's stage of the Tour de France. A beautiful day in the mountains, especially if your name is Richard Veronk. He's heading for the win. We're heading for a break. Welcome back, just in time, because this is the catch here of Axel Merckx as the peloton, this very elite peloton today of about 40 riders at the most, coming up alongside him, and as usual they don't even look across, they just go straight by him. One word of congratulations there. He broke away at 35 kilometers. He's been caught with 30 kilometers to ride, and that is now a group racing for 2nd place on the stage. And I think that's true to say, because 7 minutes is the gap now up to the leaders, up to the leader rather, which is now just Richard Veronk. And Armstrong in this group, along certainly with Tyler Hamilton and with Levi Leipheimer, and we suspect too Bobby Jewett. And don't forget, for exclusive race highlights and behind-the-scenes action, AOL for broadband members, go to AOL keyword Tour de France or AOL.com. Brioche La Boulangère getting the head of the race, and the yellow jersey of Voigtler getting a bit of confidence again as this stage finishes. Beautiful fast pedaling style of Richard Virenque. We did see him gesticulating to his car earlier. He got his drink he wanted, and running towards the last 25 kilometers of the day. He's holding on. He's losing ground, Paul. Will it be? I don't think they can catch him.
They shouldn't do, really, because it's generally downhill. He should be able to keep his tempo very much in excess of 45 kilometers now. The only difficult part for him will be on the final ascent up towards the finishing line, which is 1.5 kilometers. We're not too far away from 20 kilometers to go, and although the race profile indicates that it's generally downhill, as you can see here by the way these riders are performing, it is actually slightly uphill as well. It's difficult to find a profile which is exact, but the man in the yellow jersey there spends a lot of time at night checking out the profile of the stages, just making sure what the wind direction is going to be, and that's been of serious value to him this afternoon, because he's still in the yellow jersey at the end of the day when people thought that he might be put under a bit of pressure, but he still has managed to stay in this group which contains all of the big stars of the Tour de France this year. Ulrich has looked very comfortable this afternoon, so too has Lance Armstrong, as too as Levi Leipheimer, Tyler Hamilton, Roberto Heras. Nobody really has had any problems at all, apart from, unfortunately, Iban Mayer once again, who had a puncture at the wrong time on the final climb, the final first category climb of the day.
He's certainly not having a great Tour de France, that's for sure. But as they continue to climb into the last 22 kilometers of the day, that of course is for the leader, who is, as you can see, 6 minutes 50 ahead, almost 7 minutes still in front. So these boys have still got that 24.5 kilometers to ride, and surely they can't bridge that. We're over the mountains and boys are still climbing. This is a tough course.
It's a nasty course. There's no flat stages at all here this afternoon as we go away through the Cantal. But you know, this is a great move by Richard Virenque, attacking after 35 kilometers and hoping to stay away for 200 kilometers. But it's a huge thing for French cycling, you know, to have riders win, French riders win on Bastille Day.
Well, it reminds me of Laurent Jalabert, a rider who has ridden exceptionally well. He was leading the points jersey, if I remember right, when he won the big race into Monde. That'd be back in 1955, when, of course, the great Miguel Indurain was riding. Wonderful day for him. I remember at the time it was an airstrip that we finished on there, and then he did it again when he finished in Verdun in 2001, and that was another great occasion. By the way, Laurent Jalabert is now working almost alongside us. He's a commentator for French television. So,
well, in fact,
Virenque's still the boy today.
Yep, but that was the last time a Frenchman won on Bastille Day. But, you know, over the last 50 years, 11 Frenchmen have actually managed to win stages of the Tour de France on Bastille Day. And I remember the great French rider Vincent Barteau winning into Marseille on Bastille Day as well.
Oh, so do I. And he held the lead, I think, for about 10 days, which was a bit of a surprise. He's another man that works with us here now as well.
Yes, he is. There's 20 kilometers to go to the finish. And Richard Virenque now is going to take a serious look at the clock over the next few kilometers.
20 kilometers to go, 12 miles in old money, less than 7 minutes the gap. That should be good enough for Richard Virenque to enjoy himself. So as he pushes on now, he'll be just thinking, I can do this. I'm already the leader in the King of the Mountains with a very big lead, as we'll see later on. And Virenque now heading for some floor and victory. We'll be back. Welcome back. We're looking down here on the main field. That's Kim Kirken looking over. Not too sure what the rider on the right is doing. It's Christophe Moreau is signaling to somebody, but I can tell you the good news. We have just spotted George Hincapie in that very select group of riders as well. So he's pulled off a big coup today to stay alongside the big men in the leadership of the Tour de France. So he should hold on to his high place overall for a little bit longer. There's the leader, Richard Virenque. Remember, breaking away today at 35 kilometers with Axel Merckx. Crossed all of the mountains of the Massif Central in first place. He's now leading the race by 6 minutes and 48 seconds. And Armstrong and everybody else is in a very select peloton of no more than 50 riders. I think for the first time we're looking at a rider at last beginning to show us he is a little bit human, and he's feeling the pace now as he runs into the last 17 kilometers of the day. But he is leading the field still by a little over 3 miles. I find that quite amazing, but it's true at the moment. Oh, don't forget that coming your way after the coverage of the Tour de France today will be the wonder and the excitement of the great outdoors as we bring you the greatest moments in outdoors and action sports outside magazines. Ultimate Top 10. That's next after the coverage here of the Tour de France on ORN. 11 Tours de France has passed under the wheels of Richard Virenque, and he's about to win what will be another stage for him. And we're looking down at the peloton there now. About 50 riders, and the men that matter are all there. There will not be a big change in the immediate overall classification. There will be changes. Virenque will come up towards the leaderboard, although he's going to be a long way off the lead now, because 12, nearly 13 minutes behind Voigtler at the start of the day. He's now less than 7 ahead.
Don't discount the little climb up towards the finishing line either, because somebody may well try and grab a few seconds back. Currently, there's absolutely no change in the relationship between the big heads of state of the sport. Armstrong is still leading Hamilton and Ulrich and Heras and the rest. But I wouldn't be surprised if somebody like Ulrich doesn't have a go at trying to pull back a few seconds on this final 1.5 kilometers up towards the finishing line.
Well, you certainly will lose seconds. It's a very unusual finish where the referees will split time everybody who crosses the line. They won't get the same time unless they're right alongside one another, because it is officially an uphill finish today. Time bonuses, as always, first, second and third. You get 20 seconds for the win, 12 and 8 seconds. Don't mean a great deal at this stage of the race, because the riders are becoming separated by bigger margins now, and it shouldn't alter the destiny of tonight's yellow jersey, which, providing Thomas Voigtler doesn't crack big time on the ride up to the finishing line, he'll still be in yellow tonight. 15 kilometers to go now by Richard Virenque. The peloton chasing him haven't arrived yet at 20 to go.
Well, Virenque still holding on to a big chunk of his advantage, 6 minutes and 47 seconds. So if he's still got that advantage at 10 kilometers to go, he will start to feel just that little bit more relaxed. He will know that the chase is not coming on behind him, and the fact is that they're just defending the position of the race leader, Thomas Voigtler. It gives you an idea here as you look into the eyes and the mind of Richard Virenque just how difficult it is and how much his body is screaming out for surrender, but it will not give any respite until he gets to the summit of this finishing line here in Saint-Flour. It really is almost a masochistic finish here for the riders to come up after this longest stage of the Tour de France at 237 kilometers, to drag their bodies up to the summit here after this very difficult final 1.5 kilometers.
Just realizing, Paul, that if he does stay away now, he will have been in the lead for more than 200 kilometers, which is going to put him somewhere in the record books as one of the longest successful escapes. Because I'm looking at the figures I've got, and we're going the last big one. Do you remember Thierry Marie when he made that marvelous escape of 234 kilometers? That was back in 1991. This would really rank among some of the longest escapes in the history of the Tour de France. And we're not exactly sure, and it's actually becoming important now, which kilometer they will give him. We logged at 35 kilometers, but we can't be sure that the organisation will decide the exact moment.
Well, in fact, let's bear in mind he was involved in a breakaway before then, and it's be interesting to see whether or not the referees count it from the moment he was in the early morning breakaway, 15 to 17 riders, and then he moved away from that breakaway with Axel Merckx. Wilfred Peters coming up alongside. I think Wilfred Peters rode the Tour de France on 8 occasions as well, and he too was no mean contender, and now a very good team manager with Quick-Step Daviteman.
Well, there's the peloton, very select. I reckon 45, no more, 45, 50 riders in that group. None of the big stars, as far as we know, missing out today. They've had another day off, but they've made sure they've kept themselves together. And the work all being done by the team here of La Brioche Boulangère, the team of Thomas Voigtler, who is hanging on to his yellow jersey today. And low at moments, he's been yo-yoing off the back. There's the leader. We'll be back. There's the lone figure in amongst the cars, Richard Virenque, heading for 10 kilometers to go, 6 miles from the finish. Well, there he is now. There's the banner, 10 kilometers. He's not going to concede all of his 6 minutes 43 in just 10 kilometers from the finish, but he will lose a little bit, because I believe, Paul, he'll use those last 2 kilometers in the beautiful walled city of Saint-Flour to wave to the crowd.
He's going to have to try pretty hard to get up this final climb. I don't think he'll really enjoy it until the last 200 or 300 meters, because it is a very difficult ascent to the finishing line here. He's still conserving a huge chunk of his advantage, which at one stage was 10.5 minutes. And if you actually work it out, he's only lost himself around about 4 minutes in 60 kilometers of racing, which is quite remarkable. Problem at the back here for the Balearic Islands team. This is the French national champion who's trying to drag himself, the Spanish national champion trying to drag himself back onto the field. That's Francisco Mancebo. He's pretty high in the overall classification. I think he too could be a serious threat for a high overall finish.
Looking at Lance Armstrong off to the left there, using Floyd Landis, having a little chat with him. Smile on Floyd's face. Day's gone according to plan, I think, for the big men of the Tour de France. They haven't used this stage to attack. They were worried about it because it had all the elements required for a big attack, but they just stayed near one another. Nobody moves, so the status quo gets one day near the Pyrenees, and that's when they will all attack.
Well, here's Axel Merckx. He was just dropped off the back a few moments ago, but he's fought his way back up through the cars to reintegrate the yellow jersey group. He's had a hard day. He was with Richard Virenque after 35 kilometers of racing today. He led the race with him for an awful long time until we got to the slopes of the Col de Pas de Perol, and since then he's been left behind, picked up and dropped, and they're still just 15 kilometers to go for the main field, so still separated from Richard Virenque by 5 kilometers on the road.
Now by 6, because Virenque's a kilometer down now since that 10-kilometer banner. So it's still nearly 4 miles, the gap between these two bike riders, this bike rider rather, and the chase group. That's enough to give him a well-deserved victory today. A massive lead in the King of the Mountains. No yellow jersey for him this time like there was last year, but that's not going to worry him too much. Richard Virenque is hurting though, and tomorrow he might want to try and rest a little bit in the big peloton, although it's not an easy stage. He knows that, but he picked this stage out before the Tour de France began as the one he wanted to excel on. And boy, has he done that, winning all 9 climbs today. I know that all of those 9,000 cyclists who rode this course last Sunday on closed roads will be in awe of the performance of Virenque today.
Chetu Rubiera there in the dark blue jersey. In fact, although we're not seeing all of the US Postal Riders at the front of the pack here, there are a lot of them in this group. I've noticed Georgie Hincapie, number 5, was sitting in the middle of the pack. Noticed as well Benjamin Nouvel, the man who a lot of people criticize Armstrong for bringing into the team at the last moment. He's also in this leading group of riders. But the story of the day has been for France. It has been about Richard Virenque, the man who on 6 occasions has won the King of the Mountains classification. And today he hasn't won that classification, but he's taken a serious option on winning it for a 7th and outright record time.
I think we might call him the favourite now, Paul, although there's still a lot of mountains left in this Tour de France. Let's face it, this is only day 1 of a real tough Tour de France now, as we wind our way around the bottom of the Pyrenees and across to the east side for the Alps. Real tough Tour de France from now on. 3 riders out today that we know of. Celestino retired, Vicioso retired, and poor old Sebastian Hinault by now will be in hospital, and let's hope he's okay after he's crashed down the Col de Pas de Perol.
Virenque starting the descent now, and this will start to bring him just that little bit closer to the very difficult descent here to the medieval town of Saint-Flour. He will get a bit of respite on this descent. He's just nicely picking his way around those corners, and it looks in the main group as well of the yellow jersey as they've also turned off the gas just a little bit.
It looks as though they've sort of decided to jointly put up the white flag here and say we live to attack each other on another day. And Virenque is holding now at 6:41. He's on his way down. The thing about Richard Virenque is he's not just a great climber, he is one of the best descenders as well, and he might take time going down there. There's the big elite group, about 45, maybe 50 riders left in that group, but we'll see as time goes on. There's the main chase group, and there's Armstrong, Floyd Landis, and all who matters. Anyway, another sport for you at the moment. OLN invites you to watch the world's best surfers duel it out on the waves. The Kelly Slater Surf Invitational premieres Wednesday, July 28 at 9 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. That's the Kelly Slater Surf Invitational, right here on OLN. Richard Virenque is now 7 kilometers from the finish, and another great victory. We'll take a break. Rejoin us on OLN. Stage 10 of the Tour de France, the 5 kilometre for Richard Virenque. The peloton are under 10, about 4 kilometres in fact behind. They are closing in, but it's not going to be fast enough. And there's a problem here at the back of the race. And this looks like Stefan Goubert. Now as his gears broke, he's certainly got a problem with his bike there. Or is he abandoning the race? Well, we may not know the answer to that just now. Well, Goubert here will switch the back of the pack of some 45-50 leaders. And I've got a feeling, judging by the way he's riding, Paul, his legs have just said enough is enough.
He's gone bang. He's got cramp, I think. This is, let's not forget, the first hot day we've had in the Tour de France. And once you change from a very cold climate to all of a sudden turning up the temperature, you do get one or two riders getting strange reactions. And I think basically his muscles have just completely and utterly locked up. And that will be a blow to him because he suffered like a dog all day to stay in contact with this group. And he's getting dropped off just before we drop down into the finishing climb.
Well, it's been an awful long day in the saddle. Just over 6 hours the riders have been clear now, and that they are approaching the finishing line as the group down there contains all of the big names, and we are now asking the question, will they attack one another on the way to the finishing line, where there are certain to be split times today. It is a nasty little climb. We go into Saint-Flour and up again. And this is Bettini in this group here. This group is a massive 20 minutes now behind the leader on the road. And Bettini is in that group. So they are really the autobus, as we call them now.
That's definitely the autobus. 4 kilometres to go for Richard Virenque. He's not worried too much at all about the position of his teammate, Paolo Bettini, who's led the King of the Mountain since the very first day of this race. And I don't think Bettini will be too worried at all either about switching it across to Virenque. Virenque is absolutely burying himself now. Look at the face on him. The cut-off time today is nothing at all to worry about. It's going to be around about 1 hour, I would say, because this has been a very long stage. And a quick estimation, I would say, maybe 63 minutes.
Well, we should all get in that. Those that can, of course. Even Bettini's group, 20 minutes down. There's also another regulation. You can't kick out more than a quarter of the field in any one day. So what the riders do, they all form a big gang at the back, and you can't get rid of them anyway. That's if you've got the legs to stay in with the big gang, of course. This is now a face of agony here from Richard Virenque. All he must do is keep on thinking. He's winning one of the big stages of this year's Tour de France, Bastille Day. He's French. He's got a jersey of a leader of a classification waiting for him. And when it's all the dust settles, we're going to find he's going to go down in the history books with one of the longest escapes. It's just whether they count when he was with other riders, because sometimes they only count the distance you are actually on your own. So I'm not too sure about that. But even so, he will have been in front of that field today for more than 200 kilometres. Absolutely incredible performance. He's still leading by 6 minutes 17. Slowly but surely they're pulling back that time, but they're not pulling it back anything like quick enough.
He's got around about 1.5 kilometres of descent before he starts the long drag up to the finishing line. Good to see his average speed was still nice and high, in excess of 30 miles an hour. That's because we're going slightly downhill to the outskirts of Saint-Flour. The bottom part of the town is in the valley below alongside the river. And then as he kicks up to the medieval part of the town, it will take him 1.5 kilometres to get to the summit. And it is a very nasty sting in the tail for this, which is the longest stage of the Tour de France at 237 kilometres.
Paul, he's going to arrive with a time a fraction over 6 hours for 237 kilometres. When they had the tourists come racing cyclists, many of those guys are very good racing cyclists who rode on Sunday over this course, the winning time was almost 7 hours. That just sort of puts into perspective the fitness of these bike riders, and today in particular the incredible performance by Richard Virenque.
Well, I think you've also got to add to the fact that these guys have done 10 days of racing before they came down to do this stage as well, and the cyclo-tourists just started and did one stage of the Tour de France, so it even makes it more incredible, the performances of these guys today. But Richard Virenque has done the majority of this race on his own. Admittedly, he had a lot of help in the first part from Axel Merckx, but seriously, this is a fine effort by this guy this afternoon. And the fact that he actually planned it 10 days ago, the fact that he wanted to get away and do this is quite remarkable, because anybody who's ever been a professional cyclist knows just how difficult it is to get away from the race in a situation like this in the first part when everybody wants to go out on the attack.
We've just entered the city limits of Saint-Flour. He's just passed the sign, so he knows now he's nearly home. He's still got just over a kilometre. And by the way, the kilometre banner today, that's a little bit of good news for Richard. It's situated at 850 metres because the old city walls meant they couldn't actually string it up 1 kilometre from the line. But it won't matter so much today because everybody will get a separate time. It's an uphill finish, and Richard Virenque is going to enjoy the last kilometre of today because time isn't of the essence anymore for him.
Still got 6 minutes of his advantage, and that's pretty remarkable. You know, at 166 kilometres, he had his maximum advantage at 10.5 minutes. And really, over the very difficult terrain on the run in here towards the finishing line, he's hardly lost anything at all. There's a kilometre to go. 850 metres actually for Richard Virenque on this occasion, and listen to the crowd.
Oh. Well, the crowd has started to applaud on the finishing line. They can't even see him only on television because it's off to his right shoulder behind those houses as he will hairpin his way up to the line. This is going to be one of the finest moments of his career, I would think.
Certainly is. He now lives in Switzerland, this young French rider, but today he hasn't thought about any of the past. I think all he wanted to do was survive to the finish. He went out with a mission, and the mission was to try and get as many points in the King of the Mountains classification as possible, which is exactly what he did last year on the roads down into Morzine. If he got the stage victory, it was a bonus. Well, he's going to get the same bonus this year.
There's the hairpin bend. He's in his lowest gear. He's using his legs, which must be cramping up by now, as he continues to climb. Wait for the smile to break out. He's not eased up as I thought he might. He is pushing it all of the way to the line. Then the clock will start. It is still at 5 hours 59 minutes. He's barely going to be outside of 6 hours for 148 miles, 237 kilometres. This has been one of the most outstanding performances, and we'll talk about this for many years to come. Now they start to cheer. They can see him for the first time. Richard Virenque, stage win number 7, to marry up with the great place names of the Tour de France. Luzardidon, Cauterets, Courchevel, Morzine and Mont Ventoux, and to that he can now add a little mountain top of Saint-Flour.
And I can imagine exactly what his victory salute is going to look to. It's going to be one finger up to the sky when he comes round the corner. Face looking just a little bit drained, but it will be a relaxed face when he comes round this corner. The crowd can now finally see him. It's Bastille Day here in France this afternoon, and it's a Frenchman who's going to win.
Well, what a great Tour the French are having. The race leader will stay on the shoulders of the French champion, while the man who has been one of the best French riders, Richard Virenque, his 12th Tour de France, his 7th stage win, he is again the leader in the King of the Mountains, and it's happened in Saint-Flour. So there he is. Richard Virenque is home at the main field. There'll be a few minutes yet. The latest time gap is 5:56. We'll take a break, come back for what will be a great sprint finish. Welcome back. We're looking down here on the mountaintop village of Saint-Flour, or town, and right in amongst the red-topped roofs is one Richard Virenque, who's done the ride of his life today, a breakaway lasting more than 200 kilometres, and we're still waiting for the peloton, and 3.5 minutes has now ticked by. What a way to get your first victory of the season, stage 10 of the Tour de France. The peloton itself is still a few kilometres down the road. And on cue, there they are as they swing into the last kilometre now. 1 kilometre to go. It's actually only 800 metres as the big sprint starts now. Now, is Lance Armstrong going to have a dig? Is Jan Ulrich going to have a dig here? I can see Kim Kirken looking over his shoulder, and Ulrich isn't far off the front.
Armstrong there in 5th position there. He's got a teammate right in front of him. I think it was Jose Acevedo. There was a good move coming here from Crédit Agricole. Laurent Brochard trying to wing off the front there as they take this hairpin bend. They're around about 600 metres to go to the finish. I don't think that Ulrich is going to let Armstrong sneak away over the last few metres just to get himself a couple more seconds.
Patrice Algon is the rider there, trying to go there with Brochard, but there's a break by Mancebo. The champion of Spain's gone on the left of the picture now, and still Armstrong is trying to move forward here now. Ulrich is just following wheels in the centre. Francisco Mancebo, who's had a great day out today, just nipping points at the mountain summits, he's trying to pull away, but look at this. Thomas Voigtler, the yellow jersey of the Tour de France, is looking for a bonus here. He's being challenged by Clouden, Andreas Clouden. Mancebo, Ulrich is on the wheel there as well, and over to the left. Armstrong looks a little bit troubled here. This is now, no, it's not, in fact
it's Zabel. Zabel is there. There's a gap to the main field for Armstrong as well. Zabel's just on the back there on the wheel of Clouden. There's Mancebo. There's a gap between Armstrong and the rest of the field. I'm not sure if they'll give it, but there is a definite gap in the peloton.
There'll be no gap there as they come over the line. It will be Cloden, Zabel, Mancebo. There's the split now. It looks as though they'll give the others, and Ulrich was tagged onto the back just along with Armstrong. With the other boys, and if Tyler Hamilton is in that second half, he may have lost, what, a couple of seconds?
A couple of seconds, but all it is really is a psychological blow. But that was a very good move by Thomas Voeckler. He's had a hard day out on the road this afternoon. He's the yellow jersey of the race. He actually tried to grab himself a few more seconds at the end of the day, but watch this move here by Erik Zabel. This is a man who is not one of the greatest climbers in the world, but he's dragged his body over the mountains this afternoon. He grabbed himself a few points here in the green jersey points classification too, but I think more important is how attentive Lance Armstrong is there. He wants to make sure there was no time gaps for himself over anybody else, and in fact he almost grabbed a few seconds there over Jan Ulrich, but Ulrich himself attentive, making sure that he too is at the front end of the peloton.
Yes, there's Armstrong in the distance there, right on the wheel of the Maillot Jaune. Thomas Voeckler, Mancebo has come here. That's the order over the line then. Cloden, Zabel, Mancebo, Voeckler, Armstrong. Kim Kirken in the backdrop there, and I think too Veckman. I've just seen all of the US Postal boys arrive. They've all lost time. They made sure Armstrong was safe before they dropped off on the climb up to the finish. Welcome to Saint-Flour. Boy, what a great stage.
What an unbelievable stage. What a very dramatic finish there as well, even in the main field. It was good to see the yellow jersey on the shoulders of Thomas Voeckler. A very aggressive move by him, looking to try and get himself a time bonus on the finishing line if he could, but he was overtaken by two very fast finishing Germans, Andreas Cloden and Erik Zabel. Armstrong getting himself 6th place, and we'll have to have a look back at the slow motion replays in a couple of moments time. Jan Ulrich was definitely on the back of that group. I just caught a glimpse of his sunglasses as he came across the finishing line, but I didn't see Tyler Hamilton, I didn't see Roberto Heras, but there is the stage winner. This is the man who escaped after 35 kilometers and survived all the way to the finish, 237 kilometers. What a great long breakaway for him.
Yes, Richard Virenque going to go down in history as one of the ace men of the long escapes in the history of the Tour de France today, with a breakaway there of more than 200 kilometers. Let's have a look then at our Subaru moment, driven by what's inside. And who else could it be but the great man himself, Richard Virenque. This was the attack when he got rid of his breakaway companion for much of the day, Axel Merckx. It came halfway up the Col de Pader after with about 70 kilometers left to ride. He then faced up to that distance on his own. He has come over with quite a nice winning margin, to say the least. His 7th victory in a stage of the Tour de France, and he will shortly be crowned the leader in the King of the Mountains. Subaru, driven by what's inside. Now, as we look out across the town here, let's see if we can show you now the Pacific Life stage results, and then we can come right up to date. Here they are. Andreas Cloden, the champion of Germany, bronze medalist in the Olympic Games in Sydney 4 years ago, gets 2nd. Tries to lead Zabel up, and Zabel hung on for 3rd, Mancebo 4th, Voeckler taking 5th. So that means that in 6th place should be Lance Armstrong, and he is. The time gap on Virenque is on the right there, 5 minutes 19. Georg Toschnig riding well, Austria, former Austrian champion. Kim Kirken, Michele Scarponi there again, and Cauchioli. Watch out for him in the mountains, 10th place there today, 5 minute 19. Ulrich tagged right on the back, and I think Ulrich was the last man, but we'll have to wait for the judges to tell us that. But he got the same time as Lance Armstrong, and that's important. So too, by the way, did Iban Mayo. So good result for him after a rough ride again today. We'll update you when we come back after the break on everything on the Tour de France. See here, and the man who stormed in first of all on Bastille Day, one Richard Virenque. Always spoils the party at some stage during the Tour de France. He's certainly done it today, big time, leading for most of the stage to take a clear lead in the King of the Mountains and move up the overall classification by 5 minutes and 19 seconds. Richard Virenque then, the champion, here he comes home now. This was a painful escalade up into the top of the city here. He looks over just to make sure, but he really looks over to his team manager and says, well, that's it, we've done it. Well, the big thing is, Paul, that his time gain of about 5 minutes and 20 seconds won't worry him too much. Of course, he's the leader of the King of the Mountains, but of course what will matter is what the proximity of the riders in that back group. Ulrich and Armstrong have certainly finished in the same time, but I think that Tyler Hamilton might be given a slightly different time.
A quick calculation, I would expect Richard Virenque to move up into 4th or 5th place in the overall classification. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think he's too worried about that. In fact, he's probably going to be 4th at around about 6 minutes 52 seconds. Armstrong still there in 6th place. Eric Zabel will move up quite a lot, which is quite remarkable when you think that Eric Zabel is really a sprinter and not really expected to ride very well on these very tough mountain stages.
Well, there is the Foster's general classification. Thomas Volkler has gained a little time over Stuart O'Grady, so there must have been a split of around about 7 seconds. Sandy Kazar keeps up his 3rd place. Richard Virenque now moves into the frame in 4th. Jakob Peel did well to finish in that group. He's held on to his 5th place overall, 7:31 behind Volkler. Lance Armstrong stays in 6th place at 9:35 against the leader. They finish together. Zabel holds 7th. Acevedo is 8th, and as we saw, the Postal Service boys did drop off once they saw Armstrong in the group, and so people like George Hincapie have lost a little bit of time on the running. Tyler Hamilton has kept his 11th place, but he's lost 7 seconds, I think it is, in finishing in that second group. Hincapie plunges from out of the top 10 down to 15th. He won't be worried at all about that. Andreas Kloden, who got 2nd today, he has come in the frame as well. Ulrich made no mistakes. He's in 17th. He keeps the same distance behind Armstrong. Julich is still very much there, as indeed is Levi Leipheimer. So I guess at the end of a very hard day, the big boys in the Tour de France didn't actually lose much time at all. The cheers you can probably hear. Let's see who we find there. The hero of the day on Bastille Day. Richard Virenque has won his 7th stage of a Tour de France.
And probably one of the most difficult as well, because this was certainly not ideal terrain for a long breakaway. Richard Virenque in the past has succeeded most of his victories on the big mountain passes. Today there was a lot of undulating roads where he had to dig in very deeply and find some special energy to stay off the front end of the main field. And to survive by 5 1/4 minutes at the end of a day like that is a very remarkable sporting achievement.
Well, I have to say that that was one of the rides. The crowd adore him. He'll have even more young ladies outside of his hotel tonight waiting to catch a glimpse of him as he drinks the champagne. But, you know, I think he was glad to come off that podium, shaking hands there with Bernardino, the 5-time winner, because I think he is absolutely shattered. And I suppose he does have the right to be.
He certainly does. You know, that's a huge breakaway for him. You know, he won that stage by 5 minutes and 19 seconds ahead of the 2 Germans who were very attentive, Andreas Kloden and Eric Zabel. And moving up there very smartly towards the end there, Francisco Mancebo, Phil, getting 4th place was a very clever move.
Watch out too for Pietro Cauchioli. He rides well in the Tour of Italy, but he's never ridden the Tour de France before, and he finished 10th today, and he is a good climber. 2-arm salute for the man with 2 fingers in the air. He's won his stage. We will continue with the presentations, and Al and Bob will be back with us. We'll see you shortly.